Do you want me to do the hi, I'm Maryam Mehrtash first, or we'll do that?
You can do it at the end, or you can do it now.
Okay.
Whatever you feel. Like, you can do it straight to camera. We're rolling, and we're all here with Maryam. This is her first podcast.
This is my first podcast.
Yes. Very excited.
I'm glad you're my first.
I like to be people's first, you know? I'm really grateful for the trust, because I know that like putting yourself out there can be really scary for people, and to sit down for like, it's one thing to like write a thing on Instagram or whatever, but to like sit down for an hour and talk about your career and your thoughts and your thought leadership on, you know, the areas that you specialize in can be scary. So I hope you know that you're in safe hands, holding loving arms.
Thank you.
And that it's all going to be great.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Yeah. I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. I'd love to take it back to the beginning a little bit, just how your love for entertainment began and what got you in the game in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So I come from a long lineage of artists in my family. My grandma Giti was a famous Iranian Kurdish singer and actress during the time of the Shah. She was actually imprisoned during the revolution for 4 years for being an artist. She escaped after 4 years in prison through Iraq, and then immigrated through political asylum to Canada. But that's a story for another time.
Wow.
Her cousin, Soraya Beheshti, was also a famous Iranian Kurdish actress during that time. And my mother, she was a theater kid. She sang, she wrote poetry. Her father was a poet. My father is an incredible artist. He's a sculptor and a painter. So I feel like artistry and storytelling has been in my DNA since I was born. My parents, after we fled Iran, I was 2 years old. My mom was 21. We fled Iran during the revolution, or after the revolution, during the Iran-Iraq war. And we got off on the wrong stop in Eastern Europe. And my father couldn't find us, and my mom and I were actually thrown into refugee camps. And we were there for a few months. Before then, we also went to Canada and immigrated to Canada. When we got there, my parents didn't speak English. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to speak English through Disney cartoons. Yeah. And also my parents had these old VHS tapes of old Iranian films and television shows that I used to watch. And you know, that was their way of holding on to our culture in a new country.
How old were you at this point?
I was 2.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you said you were 2.
Yeah,
That's so young. And it's cool that you kept the language, right? They made sure that you got to keep that. I know when you move so young to a new country, it's sometimes all about assimilation, and you want to like fit in right away and make sure you kind of can blend in as much as possible. But I applaud parents, because I'm also an immigrant, who will bring their culture with them and make sure that that is still front and center. And I know we've offlined to you a lot about like now as moms in this like new time that we're in, how do we like keep the culture alive and the language alive for our kids, raising them in such a metropolitan place like Los Angeles. You know, I find that concept very fascinating. Perhaps a different podcast, but like, very interesting.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, I have kids that are mixed. My husband is white. He's white Canadian. And it's really important for me to be able to capture a part of our heritage and our culture and their upbringing. And sometimes when you're not speaking the same language in the household, it's also harder for them to, you know, pick it up more quickly. And I think for me, when we moved to Canada, both of my parents were Iranian, and they were speaking Iranian, and also they didn't know how to speak English. Yeah. So even though, you know, Farsi was really my first language, but then I learned French because we immigrated to Montreal first. And then English is actually my third language.
Yeah. Very impressive. No big deal. So then at what point do you find entertainment? Because you obviously come from a family of entertainers, of artists, but to make a decision that you want to professionally pursue that path?
Well, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to follow in the footsteps of my grandmother. That's really where the story and the love started for me. Mm-hmm. And when we moved to Vancouver, I was 9 years old, and I begged my father to put me into acting classes. So he found an acting teacher that was like just randomly. My father was a carpenter, and he had this workshop in Vancouver, and next to the workshop there was an acting studio. So he went and knocked on the woman's door and said, my daughter wants to be an actor, can you help her? And she said sure. And when I go in and I find out it's Jason Priestley at the time, 90210,
Yeah.
Jason Priestley's
Wow.
acting coach. So I started taking acting courses. I fell in love with theater. I, was a drama kid through high school, and I got an agent, and I started going out for commercials. I booked some stuff. I did a movie of the week called Rats. You can see like a glimpse of me in disturbing behavior. But the funny part about that journey is that my agent, when I was 15 years old, she felt that I was too ethnically ambiguous. And
yes.
at that time, the industry didn't know what to do with someone who looked like me. So they changed my last name to Martinez. So if you do go on IMDb, you may find me credited as Maryam Martinez. That's a story I've literally never told anyone. But
Yeah.
yes. So.
I love that, because when I was acting as well many moons ago, I would get the same feedback here in LA that I was ethnically ambiguous. And it's funny because as a Latina, a lot of people thought I was like Iranian or Persian or Russian.
Yeah.
Like I would always get like, are you Eastern European somehow? And it's so funny that we have that intersection point as well.
And then I'd go out for auditions and they're like, Maryam Martinez, do you speak Spanish? I'm like, nope.
Like French?
Yeah. French, Farsi.
No, none of those.
That's about it.
But then you eventually leave acting. You realize it's not really going to be the path for you.
Yeah. And, it was a really hard decision because my parents, as liberal as they are for Iranian parents, they still felt that it wasn't a guarantee that I was going to have success as an actor. And I mean, look, nothing in life is guaranteed, but Iranian parents, like education is highly valued. They wanted me to go study and be a doctor or a lawyer. And I always felt a little bit of guilt for the sacrifice that they had put to make sure that I wasn't raised in a country where a lot of my female cousins are now, where women don't have rights and they're oppressed. And so I felt that, I had an opportunity to make something of myself, for the sacrifice that my parents made, but also because I owe it to the women in my family who don't get that opportunity, and the women in Iran who don't get that opportunity to really, take this opportunity to do something with my life. And that's what really honestly drives me a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I went to business school.
Smart lady.
I didn't go to law school or, become a doctor, but I felt like that was like a good
happy medium.
A happy medium. And, and then when I went through business school, I felt that I wanted to come out of business school and still focus on entertainment and really marry my love of show and then business. And that's really the path that I decided to take.
How do you then move to LA? What are those early days like? Was there an opportunity that brought you here? Did you show up like most people with like $1 in a handbag and full of dreams and just figure it out?
Figured it out. I mean, so let me take a step back. Before I came to LA, I was working in Vancouver after I graduated business school. I went to Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. And then after I graduated, I ended up running, marketing and production agencies. I produced a couple of unscripted lifestyle technology shows. But I felt like I had hit a ceiling there, and I always wanted to move to California where Disney was.
Because of all the movies you watched when you were a kid.
Because of all the Disney cartoons I watched.
What were some of your favorites, by the way?
I loved Aladdin because it was the only movie where I felt like the characters looked a bit like us, as a Middle Easterner. So I loved Aladdin, but I also loved Ariel. I loved her hair. and Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those
Those were some of my favorites. I needed to figure out a way, right? I felt like I had hit a ceiling in Vancouver just in terms of the opportunities, and a lot of the larger media companies were in Toronto and I didn't want to go out east. So I felt that if I wanted to have an impactful career, I needed to, and play in the big leagues, I needed to move to Hollywood. But I had no green card and no citizenship, and I needed to figure out a way. So I moved here with no car, no money, no connections, literally just packed up one day and left and showed up here. I moved in with roommates. One of them is still a really good friend of mine, Tara Grammy, who she was like my first roommate when I didn't know also that. Nicole Boucherie, who's another Iranian actress, and all of us were 3 Canadian Iranian girls trying to make it in Hollywood, and I ended up finding a tech company that sponsored my green card. I was head of product marketing there for this technology company. And then after that, I got an opportunity to go and work at KTLA 5.
Yeah.
I was head of digital monetization there. And I really... I was really there to launch their digital strategy and bring, them from the linear age to the digital age.
In terms of like timeline, we're talking about, what year is this?
This is 2015, 2016.
Okay. So like the concept that people had, there was still a lot of stigma, I guess, around digital.
Yes.
Which is crazy to think 10 years later, how now it's like sort of the other way around. Everyone's thinking digital first. But talk a little bit about that time and stepping into, a space that was not as perhaps respected.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough because not only did I have to go in there to prove myself as a new leader that is taking on this new mandate within the company, but I also had to prove that digital is here and staying, and a lot of people at the time weren't believers because linear was still king, right?
Yeah.
And digital was treated as a stepchild. So part of what my role was to create a strategy that we could implement within, KTLA 5, but then take that strategy and really implement it across all of the Tribune media stations. And I did that. I did that over, within 12 months of being there. It was difficult. There was a lot of people on the linear side who are now having to learn digital, and they weren't believers and they didn't want to lean in. So what I really did is I focused on people who I saw were early adopters, and I worked with them to really train them on how to sell digital, how to package it, and how we can take it out to market. And then when, the eyeballs started coming and the money started coming in, and some of those linear sellers that are now selling digital started to see those commissions come in, then that created believers in some of the
I'm
other
sure
ones.
It did.
Yeah. But it was hard, it was hard. But I'm really proud of the work that I did there over the almost 3 years that I was there. And it really gave me a foot in the door in terms of now being able to play in the big leagues and work at a larger media company.
Which is when you go to CBS.
Yes. And then I went to CBS. It was CBS Interactive when I got there. And I was overseeing integrated marketing and brand partnerships for CBS Entertainment, CBS All Access, rest in peace, and CBS television distribution. So the syndicated shows as well. And I was there, for 6 years, from CBS All Access to the merger with Viacom in 2019 to the rebrand to Paramount Plus. I led the go-to-market strategy for Paramount Plus to the advertising community. And I was there until 2024.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the Paramount Plus strategy, because you were working on that pre-pandemic, really pre a lot of the streamers realizing, we got to get on the bandwagon. We all got to start creating our own streaming channels or streaming platforms. And you guys were already ahead of the curve with that, which a lot of people don't know.
So in 2018, when I arrived at CBS Interactive, CBS All Access had already been around for a few years. We had a first mover advantage, and a lot of people don't know that or remember it because we honestly didn't have a ton of subscribers. I think when, I was there, we had maybe 5 million subscribers.
It's crazy that isn't a lot, because it's 5 million people, right?
Yeah. And but they didn't have a ton of content. And I think that's part of it, right? And we talk about what happened, in the years following that, and the amount of money that started being dumped into content and what led to eventually peak TV. But at that time, CBS Originals, we had Star Trek was one of the shows that we had, one of the franchises that we had at the time, but there wasn't a ton of other original content. And a lot of the content on the platform was CBS linear content. So from there, we ended up merging obviously with Viacom, and then the rebrand happened in 2021. And what people don't remember is that CBS All Access was actually the foundation and the framework of Paramount Plus. And we had all of that technology and institutional, brain power as part of that launch for Paramount Plus. And I think that's part of the reason why our launch was so successful as well.
Yeah. And you worked on that launch while pregnant.
Yes. Yes.
And then you only took 10 weeks of maternity leave.
I did.
What was that life decision about?
Well, there are moments in your career wherein you know you're working on something big and it may not happen again. I felt that this was one of those moments. And even though I was pregnant at the time, I felt that it was important for me to go back after 10 weeks, even though I had 5 or 6 months of maternity leave, because I wanted to be there to see through the strategy I had built. Yeah. And that was really important for me. I think that women executives in this industry, it's extremely challenging to move up the ladder. And especially as somebody who is a Middle Eastern, right, immigrant like me. Mm-hmm. And I felt like this was an opportunity for me that I may not get again at a pivotal time in our industry. And launching a platform and being part of something that massive and knowing that you can have a big impact as part of that launch was part of my decision of why I went back. But it was also because I had spent, over a year working on this strategy of how we were going to roll out and how we were going to position it and what clients we were going to bring on board and, how were we going to really tier our sponsorship packages. And I felt that if I wasn't there to see that year of work, it was like I was having like another baby. I was having two babies at the same time, It's interesting because in retrospect, as you get older and wiser and you look at your children and this time is so sensitive, right? Because it's time that you're never going to get back with your children. I also always want to be a great role model for my kids. And I think sometimes choosing yourself as a mother is also important to show your kids. And this was something, we look back at my history, I went from refugee to Hollywood executive, right? Like this was a moment for me that has been a part of, my story and my dreams since I was a little kid.
Yeah. And while your kids were so little, obviously they don't know that now when they look back on your life, when they're adults and can kind of understand the timeline of your life, they'll be able to go, whoa, my mom was doing that while also having me. That's incredible. That's impressive. They'll be able to reflect on it differently.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the state of the industry. We're still in a moment of a lot of chaos. There's continued layoffs, mergers, advertising shifts. Talk a little bit about how we got here and what impact the 2023 strikes had on us being in this place right now.
Well, it happened before the 2023 strikes, right? I think people forget that consumer behavior shifted, right? If we think about linear television and traditional media, and we talked about how, TV was king and linear was king and digital was the stepchild, linear TV and traditional media didn't want to get into streaming. Yeah. And it wasn't really a strategy for them. It was survival, right? Because everybody else started doing it and consumer behavior shifted because of Netflix. Audiences were fragmented. Linear TV ratings were declining, which meant ad dollars were declining for them, right? And this shift of ad dollars going into more digital platforms was part of the wake-up call for a lot of linear executives that were like, oh, we should probably get into streaming. But again, that wasn't, a strategy that they really wanted to get behind. Yeah. That's my opinion. Because if you look at it, when the shifts happened, people were trying to play catch up to Netflix and nobody could. I mean, they were already
so far ahead. Yeah.
So far ahead, so massive. But it was also that they had so much money that they were, making these huge offers, right, to writers, to showrunners, overall deals, and everybody else was trying to play catch up and trying to match, right, for competing bids for that content. And what ends up happening after a while is that when you're pouring money into a new technology, new content, and you're competing with these massive budgets of, $9 million an episode, it's not sustainable, right? If the ROI isn't there and you're not seeing it on your P&L statements, right? All of a sudden, Wall Street's going to take notice, right? Shareholders are going to take notice and say, hey, I don't think this strategy is actually working. We need to cut back. So the mandate went from, spend during peak TV to now we have to have a path to profitability. And that's how we got here, right? It was kind of like a ripple effect of one thing after another. Peak TV streaming wars happened. And then we were hit with a double strike, which further was costly for a lot of these media companies, right? And then in LA, the LA fires happened. Yeah. So, and now, and now the contraction because everybody's been trying to get to profitability.
Yeah. Everyone was saying survive till 2025.
Yeah.
We're here now. It's almost October. It's like we've been surviving. I guess at what point do you feel like we'll be able to start thriving again as an industry?
I think there's massive shifts happening in the industry that's going to change the way that we have always done business. And I think that's part of it, is that a lot of people, I think, who say survive to 2025 are thinking that, okay, we're going to get through this and things are going to go back to normal. I don't think we're going to ever go back to what it was. I think what is going to continue to evolve and be as part of this industry is going to look a little bit different. And we're already starting to see it in terms of, the influence of the creator economy, right? And the audience is continuing to be fragmented. Baby boomers are getting older, and the Gen Alpha and, Gen Z, their viewing behaviors are different. So I think Hollywood is rewriting itself right now. We are in a moment of, evolution. We may have another peak of content, but that content may look different. It may be on YouTube, it may be on TikTok, it may be in different places, right? And AI, of course, is also rewriting the way that we work in Hollywood. And that, on top of everything else we listed, AI disruption itself has also caused some layoffs, and it will continue to.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on AI as a whole in terms of how it impacts workflows, the creative process?
Yeah. My thoughts on AI is that, there's really two sides to this argument. There's the people who are very anti-AI and saying that AI is going to, take over the human and artistic creativity of what we bring to the table, and it's going to replace us. And then there's the other side where, they're like, no, AI is going to make us more productive, and it's going to, be more of a companion for us in getting things done more efficiently. And I think there's truth in both, right? I think there is a balance in both. And I think the real risk in AI in terms of just storytelling is homogenization of creativity, right? And you're already starting to see it on online platforms. You're seeing it on LinkedIn. You go on LinkedIn now and everything looks the same, right? You're starting to see similar types of content on social media. And I think that what we need to be super conscious of as creators in this industry right now, whether you're working with brands, whether you're, launching something on television and part of your creative process, is to make sure that it doesn't really replace your creativity by using it as a tool that is helping you brainstorm and enhance your creativity, right? So I think, that is really the risk. It's the homogenization of content. Yeah. This moment in time with AI is interesting because if you look back in history and within Hollywood, every time something massively shifts, everybody gets scared, right? Like silent film eras. They're like, oh my God, the talkies are coming. Are they going to take over our jobs, right? And then you have radio and TV. Every time there was these huge shifts, everyone felt like the worst was going to happen. And it ended up creating more opportunities.
Yeah.
Maybe not in that moment. You don't feel that,
but
time. Eventually it will.
Eventually. Well, it opens doors for a whole new way of doing things that we can't even necessarily articulate right now, right? We're still sort of in the middle of that discovery process. But you mentioned brands, which I really want to get to because we've been in this moment too where a lot of brands and advertisers have had to shift how they spend those dollars and since linear and even obviously now all of the streamers who swore they would never do ads are all doing ads. So it's like, great, you just reinvented cable. How congrats.
Yes.
And screwed a lot of people in the process.
Yeah.
But now brands are having to get creative with how they spend their dollars. And we've seen a lot of this with Sugar 23 has a very big sort of finger on the pulse of these branded content that are not just product placement. And I always talk about that there's a huge opportunity there for producers to really lean into brands in a way early in their process to really start to think about how you're putting things together in a way that makes sense and not thinking of brands after the fact. So I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think brands are having a moment right now in terms of how they're partnering with TV and film development and production, and everything is cyclical, right? When it was peak TV and everybody had a lot of money, nobody wanted to partner with brands, right? And now that budgets are being cut, it's another way for production budgets to get in some revenue early on in development. And what Sugar 23 is doing is really that. That's their model.
Yeah.
Is that they're bringing in brands almost as a producing partner from the very beginning as in the development process to help get some of these movies or television shows that they're packaging up to the marketplace.
How do producers start to think about brands, though? First of all, producer has to know their audience better than the brand does, right? Even before they make the thing. So how do they intentionally approach a brand with a slam dunk? Because it also has to be undeniable from that side as well. No one's just dishing out cash because you want to have like a cool product shot. Like it's got to make sense,
It's got to make sense. And that's the key, is that you need to go after brands that feel germane and authentic to the storylines and to your IP. Whatever those storylines are, the characters are that you're building, you want to make sure that it's authentic, because if it's not, audiences will feel that. And that's the key, is that there is synergies within the audience, but then there's also opportunity for both sides to tap into different audiences that can make either the IP grow or make the brand grow, right? At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you are offering storylines that's going to enhance, whatever messaging and values that brand has. So make sure that you do your homework, right? And you understand like what are those values and what is authentic to our story and our characters.
So producers really have to start thinking like marketers, which
like CMOs.
We've known, right?
Yeah.
And more these days, especially on the independent side. What other tips should producers know? Because beyond audience, beyond making a great pitch deck and knowing those brands and having that authentic through line with what they're doing, what are those other like secret sauces that, again, people should be thinking about as early as possible in the process of whatever they're developing?
Guaranteeing some type of attrition or audience for the marketability of the show is something that a lot of producers have as an afterthought, which is really important for brands. And there's ways you can do that. You can start testing your audience when you're in development, right? I mean, right now with social media, the world is your oyster in terms of being able to test your storylines and your concepts. And one, example that comes to mind is TikTok actually did a case study on this, where they had a film producer who was working on a horror script. And the horror script was around, murders happening in the cabin. And they did this case study where they said, there might be these micro communities on TikTok that are really into people getting murdered in vans. Why don't we try that? And they did this test.
Sorry, that is just so
I know.
I know it's real. But it's like, hey, there's a great community of people that want to know about people getting murdered in vans.
No, but like that's the thing. It's like, people love true crime. True crime is so big. Yeah. So it's like really, really having that data.
Yeah.
Having that data. And, some producers I talk to, they're like, well, we don't have the budget or we can't, but like testing your ideas actually doesn't cost a ton of money. So if you're earlier on in development and you're working on your script and you're trying to figure out a way to bring on a brand or even pitch your show or concept to like a studio, being able to bring data and going, I tested my storyline and there is a huge community of people on TikTok who love stories about
murders in vans.
Murders in vans.
This is going to do well.
And, you do a clip or you do something and it goes viral, and then you take that and you're proving your audience. Like, those are the types of things, like really using the platforms that we have.
I think you're also speaking to a kind of producer perhaps that's already tapped into even how to use TikTok to their advantage and how to like play with these tools. I know there's a lot of folks who don't even want to get near it. And even like Instagram is already too much for them to figure out because these algorithms change all the time. And there's so much that's constantly in motion that to me, like I hear that and I'm thinking, great, another hat you have to wear now, aside from being your own CMO to also being your own social media specialist who can figure out these platforms enough to build enough of a case study so that you have enough data to support it. And it just sounds exhausting.
It's a lot. It's a lot. But here's what I will say, that all of those platforms have partner programs and they have resources. So they have people on their teams that are, content teams and programming teams that their jobs is to help other content creators and producers.
That's good to know. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. They have whole teams so that you can tap into.
Is this where we would find a van brand to partner with us and be the van on screen?
Horror films are really hard actually to find brand partnerships
because it's dealing with murder and scary things.
A lot of brands actually stay away from that. But the advantage of making a horror film is that the profit margins are really high.
Yeah. What are some genres that brands do tend to love? What are the things that they lean into that make it feel like a faster pathway to a yes?
It really depends on what their target audience is, right? Like if their target audience is a younger demographic, then they're going to want to lean into Emily in Paris and YA, right? If their audience is more sci-fi, they're going to want to lean into Mandalorian, right? So it's really, that's why the audience piece is so important to understand, because brands will partner with the right IP if the audiences overlap and you can show that there's value for them in that.
Yeah. I mean, when you say it, it sounds so easy to like know your audience so deeply. And even as someone who's been doing my show for as long as I have, I still find there's so many pieces of information all over the place. It takes a lot of like surveying too, your own audience. The data that you get is only one piece of the puzzle. And then you really have to do, again, more work to sort of fill in the gaps. And it's constantly changing and evolving too, So I don't know if there's a shortcut or not even a shortcut, but just a roadmap to like, how do you get really specific about that skill set for yourself to start to really understand and identify your audience so you can speak that language and know exactly what you're talking about and where the gaps are.
Yeah. And look, for independent producers to go out there on their own to try to get a brand to partner with them, it's not easy, right? Mm-hmm. Even as somebody who works at Disney, I'm on the Marvel partnerships team. I've been at Paramount Plus. Out of like 100 pitches, we may win one. It's not this like magic bullet.
Yeah.
All of the stars have to align. There's so many other things that go into it.
Yeah.
In terms of on their end, what are their priorities? What products are they pushing? Does their timelines fit within their budgets that are planned out for the year, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many other things that it really takes everything aligning and the story aligning and the audience aligning for a partnership deal to come to fruition.
Yeah. So basically a unicorn. Got it. Super easy to do. No big deal. Yeah. Are there any shows, films or shows of recent, the last couple of years that you think are good examples of how they have integrated brands? I know we talked about Emily in Paris. That one's like kind of one that I think most people think of and know of because it's so front and center, but others that perhaps may be more seamless. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, of course. I mean, any theatrical release, whether it was Wicked, they had so many partnerships from OPI nail polish to QSRs. Every single big theatrical release and television show that we're seeing right now has that as part of their strategy, whether it's, bringing them in during the production process or it's creating contextual commercials and co-branded content that will, serve as promotional pieces when the movie is released or on that platform. I mean, myself at Paramount, I worked on Grease Rise of the Pink Ladies. I worked on, we did a partnership at the time with Inspire Brands and Sonic. Stranger Things has done a ton of partnerships with like Coca-Cola. There's also brands are creating studios now, right? It was announced that Dick's Sporting Goods has created an entertainment studio called Cookie Jar Entertainment.
That's crazy. Well, Starbucks has one, Chick-fil-A, and I'm like, what are they doing exactly? I'm very interested because I haven't seen any of the results of whatever they're producing or creating. If it is, it's out there. We don't even know that it's necessarily a Starbucks or a Chick-fil-A production. But I'm so fascinated by like, what is their goal with getting into the game in that way?
Well, Starbucks is Michael Sugar. He's part of that deal, Sugar 23. And from my understanding, I don't work there, but from my understanding is that Starbucks products will be integrated early on into film and television IP during the development stage, and they get producer credit. That's really what those
Starbucks does.
Starbucks does, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of, we've talked about this. Amelia Perez, right? We've talked that it's the same thing, right? Saint Laurent was behind, was one of the producers of that movie.
But I get it. Like if you're fully financing a movie with your hard-earned, high fashion dollars, like I get that. But I guess to me, it's different if we're talking about just intentional placement of Starbucks products in a movie, then does that really warrant them as a producer? And because we've been in this huge moment in these last few years of reclaiming what it means to be a producer and the producer title that has been so diluted, it's a constant uphill battle. And now to have, I think, brands enter the space in this way, which we need them, we welcome them. Like, please give us your money. We want to amplify your brands. Like, everybody loves Starbucks. It's not that, but it's my issue is with the use of that title as if it doesn't carry weight when so many people I know have worked their whole careers to get that title, and it does mean so much. And so the more that we have this influx of folks being like, I just get a producer title for having my drinks in a thing, like it makes me die a little inside of sadness.
To play devil's advocate, is this not already happening?
It's been happening.
It's been happening. Just writing a paycheck and saying,
That's my point.
I want a producer credit, or I want to be an executive producer on that movie or TV show, and they're not really doing the producing work, but they're still getting that credit for the check.
Exactly. It's already been happening. But it's what I'm saying. Like, it's already happening in all these other ways. And now it's just a new lane of how this is going to continue to happen, which makes the fight against or the fight for how do we preserve the value of what the producer of the project, like the 1 to 3 adults really responsible for that thing, what that means. And I think it's about creating new titles that can denote that, like, yes, like Starbucks is an important part of the process. We wouldn't have gotten this without them or without that person that wrote the check. They matter. It's not that they don't, but the frustration collectively from producers who have been in this for 20 years and perhaps are still very, have an affinity for the old model, if you will, of what it meant to be a producer in Hollywood or whatever. Like, there is a struggle to hold on to that, because if that title didn't carry so much weight and value, we wouldn't give it out willy-nilly in exchange for something that we can't get. You know what I mean?
I completely understand and have a lot of empathy for that, really. I know how hard producers work. Does it make you feel better that it's not a person's name on the credit and it's a brand?
Yeah, that does. But it doesn't solve for X for all the other issues that I have. But yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. You also mentioned that, the systems that have been breaking were never built for all of us. Like, you said this recently to me, and I wanted you to expand on that because of this systemic challenges and in this sort of demise of what you were talking about earlier. So many deals were given to talent, so much money just thrown at the wall, really, to figure out how do we survive this moment. And now we're seeing that like pullback.
Yeah, I think that the systems were built in an unsustainable manner, right? And that's really what I meant, is that if we look at the economics of the system from a business model perspective, the dollars weren't making sense, right? And we're now breaking down those systems and trying to ensure that, what is the right path forward in a way that not only can the companies be profitable, but also producers, right? Who have had a really hard time really benefiting from the fruits of their labor.
Right.
So I think that as part of this reinvention that we're going through in Hollywood right now, there's room for opportunity to rethink those systems and rebuild them in a way that not only benefits the corporations and the traditional media companies and streamers, but also the people who are creatively behind the scenes on all of this.
Do you think we're going to enter an era that kind of swings the pendulum in the other way, where perhaps some of these deals that previously were given mostly to creatives are going to swing back to more producers and folks that are execution focused?
I don't know. I don't know, because I feel like habits die hard, and we're in this place where there's a lot of room for opportunity, but there's also a lot of people at the helm of those decisions right now that may lean back into the way deals were formed previously. So I think it's going to take some time for, the mind shift to happen.
Yeah.
Talent, I feel like, has shifted as well in terms of how they're viewed. The pedestal that stars and celebrities were once put on, that value that they brought to an IP, there's very few celebrities that are still, I think, on that pedestal.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's a big part of the conversation of like, how do we make a new generation of stars, or if people that can move audiences to a theater or to engage with the content in a certain way. And I think everyone's trying to figure that out. And from what I've seen, it's like almost like platform specific stars, where one person that can really do well on Netflix doesn't necessarily translate at Amazon.
We're also seeing crossover with influencers and creators, right? I mean, we're seeing that happen in music. We're seeing it happen on television. And I think we're going to continue to see that as more and more people build their own personal brand. And those audiences are loyal to that personal brand on a specific platform. The Amazons, the Netflix of the world are going to want to tap into that audience and, give opportunities to those types of creators. I mean, I don't know if you follow a girl named Tinks on social media. She got a book deal and she's now, the Fosters are developing her television show. So that's an example, right?
Yeah, but we've seen a lot of this where Hollywood comes for some of these influencers and tries to develop longer format IP around them, and it doesn't necessarily translate sometimes as well. Those audiences don't show up. Sometimes they just want to see the person they love on TikTok or social media do the thing that they're doing. They don't want them to step into that space.
Yeah, and we're also seeing it in reality television. I mean, the Mormon Wives, right? That's an example as well of how they blew up on TikTok and then they got, their
huge
television.
show. Yeah. I want to shift gears to your advocacy work and your current role, because that's with all the things that you do, I find it so commendable that you have time. So talk a little bit about the work that you're doing with Waterwell, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. So I just recently joined the board of Waterwell, which was co-founded 17 years ago by Arian Moayed. Some people might know him from Succession. He's Emmy and Tony nominated actor, director, producer. He founded this company really with the mission of, it's a nonprofit that uses storytelling to wrestle with complex questions in society. And some of the pillars that they focus on are immigration and education and, really using theater and events and digital and film to bring these stories to life.
Yeah. And then I love that this like Iranian mafia, if you will, of Hollywood, how you guys all just like know each other and you really support each other. I find that really beautiful.
Yeah, there's so many of us in the diaspora and beyond who moved to Hollywood with a dream, right? The American dream of coming and, being an immigrant and making it in Hollywood. And I think that really makes us feel connected as a community. There is this tension between belonging in America, but really longing for an Iran that was, right? And so many of us feel that connectedness.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your new role at Disney Marvel. You started about a month ago now.
Yes.
What are you doing there? How does it build on your previous experience? And what about it makes you feel optimistic for this new moment that we're entering?
Yeah, being at Disney has been really incredible. I feel very blessed and grateful.
Very full circle.
Very full circle, yes. I'm leading marketing partnerships and global marketing partnerships and promotions for Marvel, theatrical, and Disney Plus releases. And it was this full circle moment for me that I didn't even realize was going to happen until I was on the lot. I had my orientation tour, my first day or second day that I started. They gave us a tour of the lot and they took us into Walt Disney Animation. And as I was walking through it and seeing all of these Disney cartoons and the first hand drawings that Walt and his team had done in those early days brought me back to my childhood. And there's this magic about Disney that is so real. And I didn't really understand how much it affects us even as adults until I was on the lot that day at the Walt Disney Studios. And I was like, oh my God, the Disney magic is really real. And the other thing I will say is that everybody is so nice. The Disney nice culture seeps into the DNA of the employees. And it's just been really beautiful being there and experiencing that. So I feel very grateful.
Before this opportunity came to you, I know you had spent about a year really working on your writing a couple of books, and you launched a Substack as well. So talk a little bit about that journey of launching This Is Not a Memo on Substack and the 2 books that you're writing. It's so exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a journey, and it's been so scary to put myself out there. But I felt that my stories and the experiences that I have, the reason I want to launch This Is Not a Memo is really to help inspire other people. I think that so much of my immigrant story and the experiences that I've had in my life have come from having courage and resilience. And I wanted to take those stories and experiences and help other people who may be going through a hard time right now, or they're in a time of transition or reinvention. So really the Substack is really to help people lead and build a life, of courage, which I think right now with everything going on in the world, it's important to have, the message of hope out there. And that's really what my mission is I also started working on 2 books. So I have a memoir that I'm working on that really is about my family history and the revolution in Iran. And it's about how trauma can be turned into post-traumatic growth. And then I have the business book, which I've been writing. And a lot of the topics and themes in the business book stem from This Is Not a Memo, which is leadership, reinvention, and courage.
Yeah. Well, so fantastic. On that note, I think we'll move on to the martini.
Great.
If you're ready. What's your favorite Iranian dish?
Ooh, my mom makes the best zitish polo and tachin. It's so good. And I love tadig. So it's kind of like all together, which is rice that has like a little bit of layer of like egg and yogurt on top. And then she also makes zitish, which is like barberries, dried barberries that are in this like sweet and sour sauce that goes on top of the rice. So that's my favorite.
Okay. What's the biggest marketing ick, like a trend that you wish would go away?
I feel like copy culture. Is that a thing that I can say? Like, I just feel like everyone is copying everyone right now. And again, going back to, the use of AI. And when I look at a lot of my Instagram feed and LinkedIn and whatnot, and I don't know if it's a trend but it's just this like homogenizing like the content and what we're seeing online.
What's your advice for people moving to LA today, now in 2025, with no connections?
Have the courage to put yourself out there and just go for it. And I know that sounds, easier said than done, but get out there, network, meet as many people as you can, and be authentic. I think one of the things about LA is that people move out here with an agenda. And when you show up with that agenda, it shows. And I think that forming connections that are authentic and finding your community and people who are going to continue to rise up with you throughout your career is so important when you first move out here. Like when I talk about, Tara and Nicole, for example, my first roommates, we still to this day, 12 years later, cheer each other on. Tara has a YouTube show called Fuzuli. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it.
It's so good.
She's amazing. But also within, we talked about the Iranian diaspora in Hollywood. Like a lot of the people that you see me attend, their plays or their shows, and I post them on my Instagram. They're people I've actually known since we all moved out here 12 years ago trying to make it.
What's the most surprising thing about parenthood?
There's so many.
Right now, I guess.
There's so many. The most surprising thing about parenthood lately for me has been my conversations with my 5-year-old daughter. I didn't realize how deeply children start to think so early on. I had a conversation with my 5-year-old daughter recently where she asked me, "Mommy, do you ever give up?" and she just turned 5. Like she was 4 like 2 weeks ago. And I was kind of blown away by the question, also because, just kismetly within everything that I've been writing about. And I looked at her in amazement. I was like, "No, I don't. Why do you ask that?" And she said, "Well, sometimes I feel like giving up, like when I don't want to make my bed." And I was like, fair. I get that.
Lower stakes.
Yeah, lower stakes.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're already starting to think about these concepts was so amazing to me. And I have conversations like these moments where I'm like, wow, I'm just blown away by how thoughtful they are at such a young age. Yeah. And I told her, don't ever give up. And I asked her, well, what's your dream? And she said, to do whatever I want whenever I want. And I said, that's a good dream.
That's my dream as well. So
like, don't give up.
Everybody's dream.
Keep going for it.
Okay, lastly, what's your favorite way to spend a Sunday day off, like in LA? Like, what's that? vibe for you?
With my kids.
Yeah.
I just love Sundays when we get to sleep in and we make pancakes in the morning, and we have a tradition and we don't get out of our pajamas unless we have somewhere that we have to go for hours. And we just have like a slow morning of coffee and pancakes and listening to music, sit by the pool or have some friends over and barbecue, just like a real chill family day.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been so lovely.
Thank you.
Really
for
appreciate it.
Me.
Of course,
Thank you.
of course.
So and I just want to say before we leave that I'm so proud of you and your branding and everything that you've, I know you've been at this for 5 years now, right? Six years, yeah. I mean, you've been doing an amazing job with your branding. I just want to tell you.
Thank you. That's a big compliment.
It's
from the Marvel Disney lady.
No, but seriously,
hello.
I just we've been talking about this, and I just wanted to let you know that your IG game is great. I just recently saw this quote that consistency is keep doing the same thing, and sometimes it feels like nothing is happening until something happens. And, that's a reminder for me.
I saw that quote on your story and it like hit me. I was like, oh, yes, because you can't quantify it until you look back, and it's the small moments every day feel like they don't add up, and then one day just something changes.
Yeah, and you're helping a lot of people in the industry.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much.
And for having me.
You're so welcome.